Emma stared at the invitation in her trembling hands, tears blurring the gold-embossed letters announcing the charity gala of the year. The paper crumpled slightly in her grip as she heard her husband's cold words echo through their massive penthouse. "I'm not taking you to the Peterson Charity Gala, Emma. That's final." Richard Kent, billionaire CEO of Kent Industries, didn't even look at her as he delivered this crushing blow. He continued scrolling through his phone, completely unmoved by her obvious distress. "But Richard," Emma said, her voice small, "we always attend the Peterson Gala together. It's the biggest charity event of the year." Richard finally looked up, his handsome face set in a cold mask. At 42, he was still as attractive as the day Emma had met him 15 years ago, with dark hair now distinguished by silver at the temples, and a jawline that frequently appeared in business magazines' most attractive CEOs lists. Emma, on the other hand. "Emma," he said with exaggerated patience, "look at yourself. You've completely let yourself go." Emma flinched as if he'd slapped her. She knew what he saw: a 37-year-old woman who had gained weight after multiple miscarriages, whose once glossy brown hair was now often pulled back in a simple ponytail, who rarely wore makeup anymore, and who had traded designer dresses for comfortable clothes. The spark that had once lit up her green eyes had dimmed years ago. "The Peterson Gala is the most photographed event of the season," Richard continued coldly. "Everyone who matters will be there. Do you really think I want to stand next to?" He gestured dismissively at her entire body. "This, while being photographed for every business and society magazine?" Emma wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold together the pieces of her shattering heart. They'd been married for 12 years, but the last 5 had been increasingly difficult. Richard had grown more distant, more critical, more absent. She barely recognized the man she'd fallen in love with, the one who once looked at her like she was his entire world. "You could take Melissa instead," Emma suggested quietly, referring to Richard's impossibly elegant personal assistant. "She would look appropriate on your arm." Richard's eyes lit up. "That's actually not a bad idea. She knows everyone in my business circle already." He stood up, straightening his designer suit. "I'll have her make the arrangements." Emma turned away so he wouldn't see the tears now freely rolling down her cheeks. When had everything gone so wrong? When had she become someone her husband couldn't bear to be seen with in public? "I have a late meeting," Richard announced, already heading for the door. "Don't wait up." The massive penthouse door closed with a soft click that somehow hurt more than if he'd slammed it. Emma was left alone in their opulent living room, surrounded by expensive furnishings that felt as cold and unwelcoming as her marriage had become. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city below. From 50 stories up, everyone looked tiny, insignificant. That's how she felt in her own life, now small and unimportant. A footnote in the great Richard Kent's biography. Their wedding photo sat on a nearby shelf. Emma picked it up, tracing the outlines of their smiling faces. They had been so happy then, so in love. Richard had been a rising entrepreneur, not yet the billionaire he'd become, and she had been a graphic designer with her own small but successful business. They'd been equals, partners. "What happened to us?" she whispered to the photo. She knew exactly what had happened. Success had changed Richard. Money, power, and status had transformed him from the passionate, loving man she'd married into someone obsessed with appearances and connections. And somewhere along the way, she had lost herself too, becoming a shadow that drifted through their expensive home, waiting for scraps of attention from a husband who could barely stand to look at her. The Peterson Charity Gala was in 2 weeks. Emma placed the wedding photo face down on the shelf and made a decision. Something had to change. She was tired of feeling invisible, worthless, and unwanted. If Richard didn't want to be seen with her because of how she looked, then maybe it was time to remind him and herself of the woman she used to be. the woman who still existed somewhere beneath the years of hurt and neglect. Emma picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in years. "Sophia, it's Emma. I need your help with something important." Her oldest friend and former college roommate answered immediately. "Emma, it's been ages. What's up?" Emma took a deep breath. "How would you feel about helping me with a complete makeover? And I mean complete hair, clothes, fitness, everything." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "This sounds serious. Is everything okay with you and Richard?" "No," Emma admitted, her voice breaking. "Nothing is okay, but I'm going to change that." "Tell me everything," Sophia said firmly, "and then we'll make a plan." As Emma began to speak, pouring out years of hurt and rejection, she felt something stir inside her that she hadn't felt in a long time. A determination. Richard had made it clear that he was ashamed of her. The question now was, what was she going to do about it? "He actually said that to your face?" Sophia asked, her voice rising in outrage. They were sitting in Sophia's downtown apartment the next morning, coffee mugs clutched in their hands. "That he didn't want to be seen with you?" Emma nodded, staring down at her coffee. "Pretty much, yeah." "What a complete jerk!" Sophia slammed her mug down, coffee sloshing over the rim. "I never liked him, even back when you first started dating. Too full of himself." "He wasn't always like this," Emma said softly. "He used to be different." "Maybe," Sophia conceded, "but that doesn't excuse how he's treating you now." "So what exactly are you hoping to accomplish with this makeover? Are you trying to save your marriage or get revenge?" It was a fair question. Emma had spent most of the night thinking about it after her phone call with Sophia. "Both, I think," she admitted. "Part of me wants to remind Richard of the woman he fell in love with. But another part just wants to shock him, to make him realize what he's been throwing away." She twisted her wedding ring nervously. "I don't know if our marriage can be saved. But I do know I can't keep living like this, feeling worthless in my own home." Sophia reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You are not worthless, Emma Kent. You never have been. That man has made you forget who you are. But I remember. You were the most talented designer in our program, the girl who could light up a room with her smile, who never took crap from anyone." She smiled fiercely. "And we're going to bring that girl back." Emma felt a spark of hope. "Do you really think we can do this in 2 weeks?" 2 weeks isn't much time," Sophia admitted, "but it's enough to make a dramatic difference. And I have connections." As a successful fashion photographer, Sophia knew people in every aspect of the beauty and fashion industry. "We'll need to be strategic, though. This won't just be about looking different, it'll be about feeling different, too." Emma nodded. "I'm ready, whatever it takes." "Good." Sophia pulled out her tablet and began making a list. "First, we need a stylist who can help you find the perfect gala dress, something that will make jaws drop. I'm thinking Maria Chen. She's a genius at designing for real women's bodies." "I can't wear anything off the rack anymore," Emma said sadly, pinching the fabric of her oversized sweater. "Not since the weight gain after the miscarriages." Sophia's eyes softened. "Maria doesn't design for hangers. She designs for women. Trust me, she'll create something amazing for you. We'll need a nutritionist and personal trainer, not to make you skinnier, but to help you feel stronger and more energetic." "I've been so tired all the time," Emma admitted. "I just haven't had the energy to care about how I look." "Depression will do that to you," Sophia said gently. "Which is why we're also getting you an appointment with Dr. Rivera. She's a therapist who specializes in women's issues and self-esteem." Emma started to protest, but Sophia held up her hand. "Non-negotiable, Em. What Richard has been doing to you is emotional abuse, plain and simple. You need to talk to someone about it." Deep down, Emma knew her friend was right. The way Richard treated her wasn't normal or healthy. "Okay," she agreed quietly. "Good. Now, for hair and makeup, I'm calling Marcus. He's a miracle worker, and he owes me a favor after I shot his new collection for free." Sophia tapped away at her tablet. We'll also need to update your wardrobe for every day, not just the gala. New clothes, new shoes, the works. Emma's eyes widened. Sophia, I can't afford all this. Richard keeps tight control of our joint accounts, and my personal savings aren't that large. Sophia looked up, her expression fierce. First of all, that financial control is another red flag. Second, consider this an investment in your future, whatever that looks like. And third, she grinned, I have enough connections to get most of this comped or deeply discounted. The people I know will be thrilled to be part of your transformation story. My transformation story, Emma repeated, testing the words. You make it sound like one of those reality TV shows. Better, Sophia declared, because this is real, and you're doing it for yourself, not for ratings. She put down her tablet and looked Emma in the eye. There's one more thing we need to discuss. The gala itself. What about it? Richard already said he's taking his assistant, right? So how are you planning to show up? Emma hadn't thought that far ahead. I don't know. I guess I just assumed I'd get a ticket somehow. Sophia's eyes gleamed with mischief. I have a better idea. My magazine is covering the event. I'm supposed to bring an assistant, but I could bring you instead as my +1. No one would expect you to be there, especially not Richard. But he'd recognize me, Emma pointed out. Not if we're very, very clever, Sophia said, a slow smile spreading across her face. The Peterson Gala has a masquerade theme this year, remember? Everyone will be wearing masks. With the right disguise, your own husband might not know who you are yet, least not right away. Emma felt a flutter of excitement, followed immediately by doubt. I don't know, Sophia. This sounds like something from a movie, not real life. Sometimes life needs a little movie magic, Sophia insisted. Think about it, you arrive looking absolutely stunning, but unrecognizable. Richard sees you from across the room and is immediately intrigued. He has no idea he's approaching his own wife. You charm him, remind him of the woman he fell in love with, and then at the perfect moment, you reveal who you are. Put like that, it did sound appealing, a chance to reconnect with Richard on neutral ground, without the weight of their troubled history between them. A chance for him to see her with fresh eyes. Okay, Emma said slowly. Let's do it. All of it. Sophia beamed. That's my girl. Operation Gala Surprise starts now. She raised her coffee mug in a toast. To the new Emma Kent. No, Emma corrected, raising her own mug. To the real Emma Kent, the one who's been hiding for too long. As they clinked mugs, Emma felt something she hadn't experienced in years: excitement about the future. For so long, she'd been just going through the motions, accepting Richard's growing coldness and her own unhappiness as inevitable. Now, for the first time in years, she was taking control of her life again. Whether this plan saved her marriage or gave her the strength to leave it, one thing was certain: the woman who would walk into that gala 2 weeks from now would not be the same one Richard had dismissed so cruelly. And that alone was worth celebrating. Take a deep breath, Marcus instructed, scissors poised next to Emma's head. This is going to be a big change. Emma inhaled shakily, staring at her reflection in the salon mirror. Her long, dull brown hair hung limply around her shoulders, unchanged in style for years except for occasional trims. She'd always been afraid to cut it, worried that Richard wouldn't approve of a drastic change. But now, do it, she said firmly. The first snip of the scissors felt symbolic, like cutting away the first strand of a prison that had been holding her captive. As more hair fell to the floor around her, Emma felt lighter, both physically and emotionally. You have gorgeous bone structure, Marcus commented as he worked. We've just been hiding it under all this hair. He was a tall man with vibrant blue hair and multiple piercings, his own appearance a testament to his creative vision. Over the next 2 hours, Marcus transformed Emma's hair from a shapeless mass into a sophisticated, layered cut that fell just below her shoulders, with soft caramel highlights that brought warmth to her face. When he spun her chair around for the big reveal, Emma barely recognized herself. "What do you think?" Marcus asked, clearly proud of his work. Emma touched her hair in wonder. "I look fabulous," Sophia finished for her, snapping photos with her professional camera. "And we're just getting started." The next stop was Maria Chen's studio, where the famous designer took Emma's measurements and listened to Sophia's vision for the gala dress. "We want something that makes a statement," Sophia explained. "Something unexpected but classic, sexy but elegant." Maria circled Emma thoughtfully. "I'm thinking emerald green," she said finally, "to match your eyes and complement your skin tone. A fitted bodice to show off your waist, and a flowing skirt with a high slit. Dramatic, but not costumey." Emma looked at the sketch in awe. "It's beautiful, but can you really make this in less than 2 weeks?" Maria smiled confidently. "For Sophia's friend? Absolutely. We'll do a first fitting in 5 days." Next came the nutritionist and personal trainer, a husband and wife team who specialized in what they called wellness transformations. "We're not focused on weight loss," Diane, the nutritionist, explained. "We're focused on energy, vitality, and feeling good in your body. Small, sustainable changes are the key." Her husband Jack, the trainer, developed a daily routine for Emma that combined strength training and yoga. "This will help with posture, core strength, and confidence," he explained. "Physical strength translates to emotional strength." After a session with Dr. Rivera, the therapist Sophia had recommended, Emma felt both emotionally drained and strangely invigorated. The doctor had helped her recognize patterns in her relationship with Richard, that she'd been blind to how he'd gradually isolated her from friends and family, undermined her confidence, and made her dependent on his approval. "What you're describing is emotional abuse," Dr. Rivera had said gently. "It doesn't leave bruises, but it's damaging nonetheless." "I still love him," Emma had admitted. "Or at least, I love who he used to be." "That's normal," the therapist assured her. "But loving someone doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. The question you need to ask yourself is, what kind of relationship do you truly want? And is Richard capable of providing that?" It was a question Emma couldn't yet answer, but at least she was finally asking it. Over the next 10 days, Emma threw herself into her transformation with a determination that surprised even Sophia. She woke early each morning for sessions with Jack, followed every recommendation from Diane, and spent hours with Marcus learning to style her new haircut and apply makeup that enhanced her natural beauty without looking overdone. Shopping with Sophia was an education in itself. Her friend taught her to dress for her current body, not the one she used to have or wished for. They filled her closet with clothes that actually fit and flattered her wrap dresses, tailored blazers, dark-wash jeans, and blouses in colors that brought out the warmth in her skin and the green of her eyes. "Clothes should make you feel good," Sophia insisted, "not remind you of what you're not." Richard barely noticed the gradual changes. He was so rarely home, leaving early and returning late, that Emma's transformation happened largely outside his awareness. The few times he was present, he was too absorbed in his phone or laptop to pay attention to his wife's new hairstyle or clothes. The night before the final dress fitting, Emma realized with surprise that Richard's indifference no longer hurt as much. She was changing, not for him, but for herself, and that made all the difference. When she tried on the completed gown at Maria's studio, everyone in the room gasped. The emerald silk clung to her curves in all the right places before flowing gracefully to the floor. The neckline was elegant but showed just enough skin to be alluring, and the high slit revealed a tantalizing glimpse of leg when she walked. "You look like a goddess," Maria said, making final adjustments to the fit. Emma stared at her reflection, hardly believing the transformation. The woman in the mirror stood tall and confident, a far cry from the dejected person who had shuffled into Sophia's apartment less than 2 weeks ago. "One last piece," Sophia said, opening a velvet box. Inside was an exquisite mask of emerald and gold, designed to cover the upper half of her face while leaving her newly plumped lips visible. For the masquerade. Emma tried it on, and the disguise was complete. With her new hairstyle, makeup, and the mask obscuring most of her features, she looked like a stranger even to herself. "Richard won't recognize you," Sophia said confidently. "Not at first glance, anyway." The night before the gala, Emma couldn't sleep. She paced the guest bedroom where she'd been staying to keep her transformation hidden from Richard. Doubt crept in as the hours ticked by. Was she being childish with this elaborate scheme? Should she just confront Richard directly instead? She called Sophia, despite the late hour. "I'm scared," she admitted when her friend answered. "What if this whole plan backfires? What if Richard sees through the disguise immediately and gets angry? Or worse, what if he recognizes me and just doesn't care?" "Then you'll have your answer," Sophia said gently. "Look, Em, this isn't just about surprising Richard or winning him back. It's about rediscovering your own worth, remembering the woman you used to be. No matter what happens tomorrow night, that part of the transformation is already a success." Emma took a deep breath. "You're right. I needed to hear that." "Get some sleep," Sophia advised. "Tomorrow is going to be a big day." After they hung up, Emma walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, the woman she used to be was waiting to be reclaimed. The woman who had dreams and ambitions of her own, who believed she deserved love and respect, who wouldn't tolerate being treated as less than. Tomorrow night, that woman would make her reappearance, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Grand Meridian Hotel ballroom sparkled with thousands of lights, transformed into a scene from a fairy tale for the Peterson Charity Gala. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the gathered crowd, the city's elite in designer gowns and tuxedos, their faces partially concealed by elaborate masks, in keeping with the masquerade theme. In a private room adjacent to the ballroom, Emma stood before a full-length mirror, hardly recognizing herself. The emerald gown hugged her figure perfectly, the silk material catching the light with every movement. Marcus had styled her hair in loose, glamorous waves, and her makeup was flawless, subtle enough to look natural but dramatic enough to enhance her features behind the mask. "You look incredible," Sophia said, snapping a few final photos. She was striking in her own right, wearing a fitted black gown that contrasted with her platinum blonde hair. Emma touched the mask nervously, making sure it was secure. "I keep thinking Richard will know it's me right away." "Trust me, he won't," Sophia assured her. "Men are remarkably unobservant, and Richard hasn't really looked at you in years." She squeezed Emma's hand. "Remember the plan. We enter separately. I'll go in now as press, and you follow in about 15 minutes. That gives me time to locate Richard and text you his position." Emma nodded, her stomach fluttering with nerves. "What if he doesn't approach me?" "He will," Sophia said confidently. "Every man in that room will want to talk to you tonight." She kissed Emma's cheek carefully, avoiding her makeup. "Just remember what Dr. Rivera said, no matter what happens with Richard, this night is about you reclaiming your power." After Sophia left, Emma paced the small room, trying to calm her racing heart. Part of her wanted to call the whole thing off, to retreat to the safety of invisibility. But a stronger part, the part that had been reawakening over the past 2 weeks, pushed her forward. When her phone buzzed with Sophia's text, Emma took a deep breath and opened the door. The corridor leading to the ballroom seemed endless. With each step, Emma focused on her posture, her walk, the lessons from Jack about projecting confidence through body language. By the time she reached the grand entrance, she was no longer trembling. She paused at the top of the marble staircase that descended into the ballroom, giving herself a moment to survey the scene below. The room was packed with beautiful people in glittering attire, moving like exotic birds between tables laden with champagne and gourmet appetizers. Sophia's text had said Richard was near the bar on the far right side of the room. Emma spotted him immediately, tall and handsome, in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, a simple black mask covering the area around his eyes. Beside him stood his assistant Melissa, blonde and slim in a red dress, laughing at something he'd said. Emma's heart clenched at the sight. They looked like the perfect power couple, exactly the image Richard wanted to project to the world, nothing like the reality of his actual marriage. Taking one final deep breath, Emma began her descent down the staircase. She felt it immediately, the shift in the room's atmosphere as heads turned in her direction. Conversations paused, and a subtle wave of whispers followed her progress. The confidence that had momentarily wavered came flooding back. These people didn't know her as Richard's invisible wife, they saw her as she truly was, a beautiful, confident woman commanding attention. From the corner of her eye, Emma saw Sophia expertly positioning herself to capture photos of the moment, her camera trained not on Emma, but on the reaction her entrance was creating. And what a reaction it was! As Emma reached the bottom of the staircase, she saw that Richard had turned to look at what was causing the stir. His champagne glass stopped halfway to his lips, his attention fully captured by the mysterious woman in emerald. Emma smiled slightly behind her mask and turned away, moving gracefully through the crowd toward the opposite side of the room. The plan wasn't to approach Richard directly, it was to make him come to her. Several men immediately tried to engage her in conversation, offering champagne and compliments, but Emma politely excused herself each time, maintaining an air of pleasant mystery. She accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and positioned herself near one of the massive floral arrangements, providing a perfect vantage point to observe Richard while appearing to admire the decorations. She didn't have to wait long. Within minutes, she felt a presence beside her and turned to find Richard standing there, his blue eyes intense even behind his mask. "I don't believe we've met," he said, his voice carrying the smooth confidence that had once made her heart race. "I'm Richard Kent." Emma took it, feeling a strange disconnect, as she shook her own husband's hand as if they were strangers. She said, deliberately pitching her voice slightly lower than usual. "The pleasure is entirely mine," Richard replied, his gaze moving appreciatively over her gown. Emma smiled enigmatically. "Part of the mystery of a masquerade is remaining anonymous, isn't it?" Richard laughed, clearly intrigued by the challenge. "True, but I make it my business to know everyone worth knowing in this city. And someone as stunning as you should definitely be on my radar." The compliment, so freely given to a stranger yet so long withheld from his wife, stung Emma despite her preparation for this moment. Still, she maintained her composure. "Perhaps I'm new in town," she suggested. "Then allow me to welcome you properly," Richard said, signaling a waiter for fresh champagne. "What brings you to our little charity event?" Emma accepted the champagne, using the moment to gather her thoughts. "I'm passionate about the Peterson Foundation's work," she said truthfully. The charity, which provided art education for underprivileged children, had always been close to her heart, something Richard had once known but seemed to have forgotten. "Are you an artist yourself?" Richard asked, seeming genuinely interested. "I used to be," Emma answered honestly. "A graphic designer, actually." A flicker of something recognition crossed Richard's face, but disappeared quickly. "Used to be? What happened?" Emma took a sip of champagne, buying time. This conversation was already veering into dangerous territory. "Life happened," she said finally. I lost my way for a while, but I'm finding my way back." Richard studied her with unexpected intensity. "I know what you mean. Sometimes we get so caught up in building one kind of life that we forget what made us happy in the first place." The sincerity in his voice surprised Emma. Was this the real Richard breaking through the polished businessman exterior, or just a line he used to charm beautiful strangers? "And what makes you happy, Mr. Kent?" she asked. Richard's smile faltered slightly. "These days, I'm not entirely sure." He glanced across the room to where Melissa was chatting with a group of socialites. "Achievement. The usual suspects. Not love. Family." Richard's eyes snapped back to her face, his expression suddenly guarded. "You ask very personal questions for someone who won't even share her name." Emma felt a flicker of satisfaction at having disturbed his smooth facade. "The mask gives me courage," she admitted. "And sometimes strangers can see truths that those closest to us miss." "What truth do you see in me?" Richard challenged, stepping closer. Emma met his gaze steadily. "I see a man who has everything he thought he wanted, but isn't happy. A man who's forgotten what really matters." For a moment, Richard looked genuinely shaken. Then his charm reasserted itself with a practiced laugh. "That's quite an analysis from a 5-minute conversation at a charity gala. Do you read palms as well?" "Only when the lines are particularly clear," Emma countered. Their verbal sparring was interrupted by the arrival of Gregory Peterson himself, the aging philanthropist, whose foundation was the evening's beneficiary. "Richard, there you are," Peterson boomed, clapping Richard on the shoulder. "I've been looking everywhere for you. And who is this lovely lady?" His kind eyes twinkled at Emma from behind a gold-rimmed mask. "We were just getting acquainted," Richard said smoothly. "She was about to tell me her name." Emma smiled warmly at Peterson, whom she had met many times before at charity events. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Peterson. Your foundation does remarkable work." Peterson studied her for a moment, a curious expression crossing his face. For a terrifying second, Emma thought he might recognize her, but he simply smiled and said, "The pleasure is mine, my dear. I hope you'll both join me at my table for dinner." As Peterson moved away to greet other guests, Richard turned back to Emma. "Have dinner with me," he said, no longer a question but not quite a command. "I find myself wanting to continue our conversation." Emma hesitated. Dining at the same table would mean a longer, more intimate interaction, increasing the chances of Richard recognizing her. But it was also exactly the opportunity she had hoped for. "What about your date?" she asked, nodding toward Melissa. "Won't she mind?" Richard glanced dismissively in Melissa's direction. "She's not my date. She's my assistant, here in a professional capacity." The casual way he discarded Melissa, whom he had been perfectly happy to bring instead of his wife, told Emma everything she needed to know about how little people meant to Richard beyond their usefulness to him. "In that case," she said carefully, "dinner would be lovely." As Richard guided her toward Peterson's table with a hand lightly touching the small of her back, Emma caught Sophia's eye across the room. Her friend gave her a subtle thumbs up and mouthed, "Perfect," while snapping another photo. The game was on, and so far, Emma was winning. But as they approached the table where she would spend the next hour in close proximity to her own husband, who had no idea who she was, Emma wondered if winning was really what she wanted after all. The Peterson Foundation's table was set for 10, with elaborate floral centerpieces and fine china bearing the charity's emblem. Richard pulled out a chair for Emma, a courtesy she couldn't remember him extending to her in years, and seated himself beside her, close enough that she could smell his familiar cologne. Gregory Peterson sat at the head of the table, with his wife Martha beside him. The remaining seats filled quickly with other major donors and board members, including the city's mayor and his wife. Melissa, Emma noted with a mixture of satisfaction and sympathy, had been relegated to a table across the room with other assistants and staff members. "I still don't know your name," Richard murmured, as servers poured wine and placed elaborate appetizers before them. Emma smiled enigmatically. Let's keep it that way a little longer. It adds to the intrigue, don't you think? Richard studied her with genuine curiosity. You're not like most women I meet. Is that a compliment? Definitely. His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, a detail Emma had almost forgotten. Most people are so eager to establish their credentials, their connections. You're refreshing. Perhaps I have no credentials worth mentioning, Emma suggested lightly. Richard shook his head. I doubt that very much. You carry yourself with too much confidence to be insignificant. The irony of his statement wasn't lost on Emma. The same man who had declared her too embarrassing to bring to this very event was now captivated by her presence, unable to see that she was the same woman he had rejected. The first course arrived an artfully plated salad with truffle vinaigrette, and the table's conversation turned to the Foundation's recent achievements. Emma listened attentively, occasionally contributing insights about arts education that caused Peterson to beam with approval. You seem quite knowledgeable about our programs, the philanthropist noted. Emma smiled. I've followed your work for years, especially the mural project in the downtown district. Were you involved with that? Peterson asked. His interest piqued. Before Emma could answer, Richard interjected. My wife actually designed the original concept for that project. A startled silence fell over their immediate vicinity. Richard himself looked surprised by his own words, as if they had escaped without his permission. I didn't realize you were married, Richard, said the mayor's wife with poorly disguised curiosity. You came with your assistant tonight. Emma held her breath, watching Richard's face. For a brief moment, something like shame flickered in his eyes. Yes, I am married, he said quietly. My wife couldn't join us tonight. Martha Peterson, a kind woman in her 70s who had always been fond of Emma, frowned slightly. That's a shame. Emma is such a lovely person. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Yes, well, she's been busy. The blatant lie hung in the air. Emma felt a surge of mixed emotions, anger at his dishonesty, but also a strange vindication. At least in this public setting, Richard acknowledged her existence, even claimed pride in her work. The conversation moved on, but Emma noticed that Richard had grown more subdued. When the main course arrived, a perfectly prepared filet mignon with seasonal vegetable shape picked at his food distractedly. Is something wrong? Emma asked softly. Richard glanced up, seeming to come back from far away. No, hearing them talk about my wife brought up some complicated feelings. Would you like to talk about it? Emma offered, hardly believing her own boldness. Sometimes it's easier to confide in a stranger. Richard hesitated, then gave a small nod. My marriage isn't what it used to be, he admitted quietly, his voice pitched for her ears alone. Actually, that's an understatement. We've grown so far apart that sometimes I wonder if we're even the same people who fell in love all those years ago. Emma's heart beat faster. This was the most honest Richard had been in years, ironically, with someone he thought was a complete stranger. What happened? She asked carefully. Richard sighed, twirling the stem of his wineglass between his fingers. Success happened. Money happened. I became obsessed with building my company, with being respected and admired. And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing her. Your wife? Emma, he said, and hearing her name on his lips sent a jolt through her. She used to be so vibrant, so full of life and creativity. She had this laugh that could light up a room. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. When we met, she was this brilliant designer with big dreams. I was nobody, just a guy with ideas and ambition. She believed in me when no one else did. She sounds wonderful, Emma said softly, fighting to keep her voice steady. She was, Richard agreed, then corrected himself. She is. The problem isn't her, it's me. I've become someone I'm not sure she would have fallen in love with. Sometimes I catch her looking at me like she's trying to find traces of the man I used to be. Emma's carefully constructed facade threatened to crack. This vulnerable admission was so at odds with the cold rejection he'd delivered in their penthouse. "If you know all this," she asked, "why not try to change things?" Richard's expression darkened. "It's not that simple. We've both changed. After the miscarriages, something broke between us. She withdrew into herself, and I threw myself into work. It was easier than facing the pain." He shook his head. "I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm telling you all this. Sometimes a mask gives permission to speak truths we normally keep hidden," Emma suggested, her own eyes stinging behind her emerald disguise. "Maybe." Richard looked at her intently. "There's something familiar about you." Emma's pulse quickened. "Perhaps in another life," she said lightly, trying to steer the conversation away from dangerous territory. "Tell me more about your company. Kent Industries is quite impressive." Richard allowed the subject change, though his eyes remained thoughtful. The man beside her seemed different from the cold, appearance-obsessed husband she'd grown to fear. Here, speaking to a woman he found attractive but had no history with, he was more relaxed, more genuine glimpses of the Richard she had fallen in love with shining through. When dessert arrived, an elaborate chocolate creation, Richard barely noticed it. So engaged was he in their conversation, which had turned to art and design. "My wife would love this discussion," he said suddenly. "She has strong opinions about design ethics." "And where is your wife tonight?" Emma asked, unable to resist. Richard's expression clouded. "At home, I assume." "You don't know?" He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "We haven't been communicating well lately." "Why didn't you bring her tonight?" The question hung between them, dangerous and pointed. Richard took a slow sip of wine before answering. "The truth?" he asked, his voice low. Emma nodded. "I told her I didn't want to be seen with her." The words came out flat, stripped of justification. "I said she'd let herself go, that she would embarrass me in front of my business associates." Emma's breath caught. Hearing him admit it so plainly, to a stranger no less, made the hurt fresh again. "That sounds cruel," she said carefully. "It was cruel," Richard agreed, surprising her. "I've become someone who says cruel things to the person I once promised to cherish." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration Emma knew well. "The worst part is, I knew it was wrong even as I said it. I saw the pain in her eyes, and part of me wanted to take it all back immediately. But pride is a terrible thing. What would you say to her now, if you could start that conversation over?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Richard looked directly into her eyes, and for a terrifying moment, Emma thought he had recognized her. But he simply answered with unexpected honesty. "I'd tell her that I'm sorry, that I'm scared of how far apart we've drifted, that when I look at her, I'm reminded of all my failures as a husband, as the father we never got to be." His voice broke slightly. "And that it's easier to blame her for changing than to admit how much I've changed, how far I've fallen from the man she loved." Emma blinked rapidly, fighting back tears that would surely ruin her makeup and possibly loosen her mask. This raw honesty was everything she had hoped for but never expected. "Perhaps you should tell her that," she suggested, "instead of leaving her home alone while you attend galas with your assistant." A flicker of defensiveness crossed Richard's features. "You make it sound so simple. Isn't it? Pride against love?" Emma challenged. "Which matters more in the end?" Before Richard could answer, Gregory Peterson stood and tapped his glass with a spoon, signaling the start of the evening's speeches and fundraising auction. The intimate bubble that had formed around Emma and Richard burst as the room's attention turned to the podium. As Peterson spoke about the Foundation's mission, Emma felt Richard's eyes on her profile. She kept her gaze forward, using the moment to collect her thoughts. The night had already revealed more than she had anticipated. Richard's admissions suggested there might still be hope for them if she could find a way to bridge the gulf between the masked stranger he was confiding in and the wife he had rejected. The real test was still to come. After Peterson's speech and a successful charity auction that raised over $2 million, the formal part of the evening gave way to dancing. The lights dimmed, and a small orchestra began playing on a raised platform at one end of the ballroom. "Would you dance with me?" Richard asked, extending his hand to Emma as couples began moving toward the dance floor. Emma hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. "I'd like that." As Richard led her to the dance floor, Emma caught sight of Melissa watching them with poorly disguised annoyance. She felt a fleeting sympathy for the assistant, who had clearly expected to be the focus of Richard's attention tonight. The orchestra played a waltz, and Richard smoothly pulled Emma into his arms, one hand at her waist, the other clasping her hand. The familiar sensation of dancing with her husband, something they hadn't done in years, sent a wave of nostalgia through Emma. "You're a beautiful dancer," Richard commented as they moved gracefully among the other couples. "My husband taught me," Emma replied truthfully. In the early days of their relationship, Richard had insisted on teaching her to waltz properly for the numerous charity events and galas they attended together. Richard's eyebrows rose above his mask. "You're married?" Emma nodded, watching his reaction carefully. "Does that bother you?" "It shouldn't," he admitted after a slight pause, "considering my own situation, but I confess I'm disappointed." "Why?" Emma pressed. "You've spent most of the evening talking about your wife." "True," Richard conceded, guiding her through a turn. "But there's something between you's a connection. You must feel it too." The irony wasn't lost on Emma. Of course there was a connection, they had been married for 12 years. But Richard, blind to her true identity, was essentially admitting he was attracted to his own wife while believing her to be a stranger. "Perhaps what you're feeling is the freedom of speaking openly without consequences," Emma suggested. "The mask gives you permission to be honest in a way you haven't been with your wife." Richard's steps faltered slightly before he recovered. "You're very perceptive. Or perhaps I recognize the situation," Emma said carefully. "My own marriage has its challenges." Richard's interest was immediately piqued. "What kind of challenges?" Emma considered how much to reveal. "My husband is a successful man, much like yourself. Over time, his success changed him. He became more concerned with appearances, with how I reflected on him." Understanding dawned in Richard's eyes. "He criticized you? Made you feel less than?" "Yes," Emma admitted softly, "until I almost forgot who I was." "What did you do?" Richard asked, his voice hushed, as if her answer held some important key. Emma met his gaze directly. "I decided to remember who I was before I became just his wife, to reclaim the parts of myself I had allowed to fade away." "And has it worked?" "I'm still figuring that out," Emma said honestly. "Tonight is part of the experiment." Richard's arm tightened slightly around her waist. "Does your husband know you're here?" "No," Emma admitted. "Does your wife know you told her she was too ugly to accompany you tonight?" The blunt question caused Richard to miss a step. They stopped in the middle of the dance floor, other couples swirling around them. "You make me sound terrible," he said, his voice strained. "Are your words untrue?" Emma challenged. Richard's jaw tightened. "No," he admitted after a moment. "But hearing them repeated back makes me realize how they must have sounded to her." He resumed dancing, guiding them toward the edge of the floor where they could speak more privately. "I never thought of myself as a cruel man, you know. Before I met Emma, I prided myself on being kind, honorable. What changed?" Richard's expression turned inward, contemplative. "Fear, maybe. Fear of losing everything I'd built. Fear of not measuring up to the image I thought I needed to project, he sighed. The more successful I became, the more I worried about maintaining that success. And somehow, that translated into controlling every aspect of my life, including how my wife looked, dressed, behaved. The music changed to a slower, more intimate melody. Richard pulled Emma closer, their bodies moving in perfect synchronization. "I've missed this," he murmured, almost to himself. "What?" "Dancing, talking, connecting with someone who sees past the billionaire CEO facade." His blue eyes searched her face. "It's been years," Emma admitted. "We used to dance in our kitchen, though. No fancy steps, just swaying to whatever was on the radio while making dinner together." Richard's expression softened with recognition. "Emma and I used to do that too." For a heart-stopping moment, Emma thought he had made the connection. But Richard continued, oblivious to her momentary panic. "We had this Sunday ritual jazz playing, cooking together, dancing between stirring the sauce and chopping vegetables." His voice held a wistfulness that made Emma's throat tight. "I can't remember the last time we did that." Work emails started interrupting, then business calls. Then I started scheduling meetings on Sundays. He trailed off, then added quietly, "I stole those moments from us, not her. Me." Emma struggled to maintain her composure. "It sounds like you miss her. The real her, not just who you want her to be." "I do," Richard admitted, the simple words carrying the weight of years of regret. "When did I stop seeing her, really seeing her?" "Perhaps," Emma suggested carefully, "you could start looking again." Richard nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "There's something about you," he said. "Something so familiar, yet I can't place it." Emma's heart raced. It was approaching the moment of truth, but she wasn't quite ready. There was more she needed to understand. "If your wife were here tonight," she asked, "what would you say to her?" Richard thought for a moment, their bodies still moving slowly to the music. "I'd tell her I'm sorry. Not just for what I said about the gala, but for all of it, for the way I've made her feel invisible, for prioritizing my image over her feelings, for forgetting what matters." He swallowed hard. "I'd tell her I miss the us we used to be, and that I want to find our way back, if she's willing to try." "And if she were not the woman you expected?" Emma pressed. "If she had changed, found her strength, her voice?" "I would want her more," Richard said with surprising firmness. "The Emma I fell in love with was never a decoration on my arm. She was vibrant, talented, opinionated. Somewhere along the way, I made her believe those qualities weren't valuable anymore." Shame colored his voice. "If she found her way back to herself without my help or in spite of me, I would consider myself lucky if she still wanted anything to do with me." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Emma felt tears threatening again and blinked them back. The orchestra finished their song, and couples around them applauded politely. "Would you like some air?" Richard asked, noticing her emotion. "The terrace should be quiet." Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. Richard led her through the glass doors that opened onto a spacious terrace overlooking the city. The night air was cool and refreshing after the warmth of the ballroom, and they were almost alone, just a few other guests scattered along the stone balustrade, engaged in quiet conversation. Richard led her to a secluded corner where a small fountain provided both privacy and gentle background noise. The city spread out below them, a tapestry of lights against the dark sky. "Better?" he asked as Emma took a deep breath of the night air. "Yes, thank you." She moved to the railing, looking out at the view. "I've made you uncomfortable with all my personal confessions," he said apologetically. "That wasn't my intention." Emma shook her head. "No, I asked for your honesty, and I appreciate it." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, the distant sounds of the gala filtering through the closed doors behind them. "I should probably be getting back soon," Emma said finally. "It's getting late. Will you tell me who you are before you go?" Richard asked softly. "Or at least how I can see you again." The moment had arrived. Emma turned to face him fully, her heart pounding against her ribs. "You already know who I am, Richard," she said quietly. "You just haven't been looking." Confusion crossed his features, followed by intense scrutiny as he searched her face. What little of it was visible behind the mask. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice uncertain. Emma reached up slowly and untied the ribbon securing her mask. With a deep breath, she lowered it, revealing her face completely for the first time that evening. "Emma?" Richard whispered, disbelief and shock warring in his expression. "How? What?" He took a step back, his eyes wide. "I don't understand." "I think you do," Emma said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You didn't want to take your ugly wife to the gala, so I came on my own terms instead." Richard stared at her as if seeing a ghost. "But you're—" He gestured helplessly at her transformation. "I would never have recognized you, because you stopped seeing me a long time ago," Emma said, the hurt she'd been holding back finally coloring her words. "Tonight, you merely looked for the first time in years, and you had no idea who I was." Richard's face paled beneath his mask, which he removed with shaking hands. "Emma, don't," she interrupted. "I heard everything you said tonight. About us, about our marriage, about how you've been feeling. Now I need you to hear me." She took a steadying breath. "You just stopped noticing." Richard looked stricken. "Emma, I am so sorry. What I said to you about the gala was unforgivable. I was cruel and shallow and—" "Yes, you were," Emma agreed, cutting through his self-flagellation. "But that's not why I'm here. I'm not looking for an apology, Richard. I'm looking for a decision." "A decision?" Emma nodded. "About our marriage. About whether what we had, what we could still have, is worth fighting for. Worth changing for." She gestured toward the ballroom. "Tonight showed me that the man I married is still in there somewhere. The question is whether he wants to come back, not just for tonight, but for good." Richard stepped closer, hesitantly reaching for her hand. When she didn't pull away, he clasped it gently between both of his. "I want to come back," he said quietly, "but I need to know if it's too late, if I've hurt you too badly to fix this." Emma looked into his eyes, searching for the truth. "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but I'm willing to find out if you are." In the distance, the clock tower struck midnight. The masquerade was officially over. The ride home in Richard's private car was silent, tension thick in the air between them. Emma sat with her mask in her lap, running her fingers over its intricate design, while Richard gazed out the window. Neither of them had been ready to return to the gala after Emma's revelation. Instead, Richard had made their excuses to Gregory Peterson, who had looked between them with knowing eyes but asked no questions. Now, approaching their penthouse building, Emma felt a strange mix of emotions: triumph at having pulled off her masquerade, anxiety about what would happen next, and a tentative hope that perhaps, just perhaps, tonight might be the beginning of something new, rather than the end of something broken. The elevator ride to the penthouse was equally silent. Richard kept glancing at her when he thought she wasn't looking, his eyes tracking over her transformed appearance with a mixture of admiration and shame. When they finally entered their home, Richard removed his tuxedo jacket and loosened his tie, a gesture so normal it almost made Emma laugh. After everything that had transpired, here they were, going through the motions of a normal evening. "Would you like a drink?" Richard asked, his voice unnaturally formal. "I think we could both use one." Emma nodded, kicking off her heels with a sigh of relief. "White wine, please." As Richard moved to the bar to pour their drinks, Emma walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, taking in the familiar view that had been the backdrop to so many moments in their marriage, both happy and painful. Here, Richard said, appearing beside her with a glass of chilled white wine. He had poured himself a whiskey, which he sipped nervously. Thank you. Emma accepted the glass, and they stood side by side looking out at the city lights. How did you do it? Richard finally asked, breaking the silence. The transformation, I mean. Emma smiled slightly. I had help. Sophia connected me with her fashion industry friends after our conversation about the gala. Sophia, Richard repeated, nodding slowly. I should have known she'd be involved. She never liked me much. She was protecting her friend, Emma said simply. And she was right to. Richard winced but didn't argue. You look beautiful, he said softly. But you always were beautiful, Emma, even when I said otherwise. Emma turned to face him fully. Then why did you say it? Why did you refuse to take me to the gala? And don't say it was about appearances, Richard. Not after everything you've admitted tonight. Richard took a deep breath and set his drink down on a nearby table. The truth? Always, Emma insisted. I was afraid, he admitted, his voice low and pained. Not of how you looked, but of what you represented. Emma's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Richard ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she knew well. Every time I looked at you, I saw my failures. I saw the family we hadn't been able to create because I was too focused on building my empire. I saw the promises I'd broken about always putting us first. I saw the woman who knew me before I was Richard Kent, billionaire CEO who knew the real me, flaws and all. He turned to face the window, his reflection grim against the dark glass. It was easier to criticize you, to push you away, than to face what I'd become. Every time you looked at me with disappointment, I saw the truth that I was no longer the man you fell in love with. Emma absorbed his words, recognizing the painful truth in them. So you made me feel worthless to avoid feeling worthless yourself. Richard flinched but nodded. It's not an excuse. It's an explanation, and a pathetic one at that. Instead of facing our problems together, I retreated into work and material success. And the more I did that, the harder it became to reconnect with you. We both retreated. Emma acknowledged. After the miscarriages, I was so lost in grief that I stopped trying. I gave up on myself, on my career, on us. Richard shook his head firmly. No, don't do that. Don't take responsibility for my cruelty. You had every right to grieve, to struggle. My job as your husband was to support you, not judge you. A silence fell between them, heavy with years of unspoken pain and regret. What happens now? Emma finally asked, voicing the question that hung in the air. Richard looked at her, really looked at her, in a way he hadn't in years. That depends on you, Emma. After the way I've treated you, I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to end our marriage. The word hung between them, stark and frightening. Divorce, the logical conclusion to years of growing apart. Yet standing here now, seeing glimpses of the man she had fallen in love with, Emma wasn't certain that was what she wanted. Is that what you want? She asked quietly. No, Richard answered without hesitation. I want another chance. I want to find our way back to each other. He stepped closer, not touching her but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. The question is, after everything, could you ever trust me again? Could you ever forgive me? Emma considered his question seriously. I don't know, she answered honestly. What I do know is that the woman you danced with tonight, the woman you opened up to and connected with, that's still me, Richard. That part of me never disappeared. I just stopped showing it to you because you stopped seeing it. I see you now, Richard said softly. Tonight, talking to you, dancing with you, it reminded me of everything I fell in love with. Your insight, your empathy, your quiet strength, and finding out it was you all along. He shook his head in wonder. It was like being given a second chance I don't deserve. Emma set her wine glass down and took a small step toward him. Maybe neither of us deserves a second chance, but maybe that's not the point. Maybe what matters is what we do with it. Richard nodded slowly. What do you want to do with it, Emma? It was the first time in years he had asked what she wanted, truly asked, and waited for her answer. Emma took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. I want us to try, she said finally. Not to go back to how things were, neither of us want that, but to build something new, something honest. She looked at him squarely. But I have conditions. Name them, Richard said immediately. First, we need counseling. Professional help to work through everything that's brought us to this point. Richard nodded. Agreed. I should have suggested that years ago. Second, I want to restart my design career. I've been thinking about it for a while, and tonight confirmed it's something I need to do for myself. Of course, Richard said. I'll support you however you need. Third, Emma continued, her voice firm, no more separate lives. We're either partners in this marriage, in every sense of the word, or we're not. Richard stepped forward and tentatively reached for her hand. When she didn't pull away, he clasped it gently. I want that too. More than you know. Emma looked down at their joined hands. I can't promise this will work, Richard. I can only promise to try. That's all I'm asking for, he said softly. A chance to try, to be the husband you deserve. Emma felt tears threaten again, but this time she didn't fight them. Tonight, when you didn't recognize me, part of me was devastated. But another part realized something important. What was that? Richard asked. That I didn't need your validation to know my worth. She squeezed his hand. I rediscovered myself these past 2 weeks, and I won't lose that again, not for you, not for anyone. Richard's eyes filled with unexpected tears. Good, he said firmly. That's how it should be. I fell in love with a woman who knew her own mind, who challenged me, who had her own dreams. I just got so caught up in my own ego that I forgot what really mattered. A tear slipped down Emma's cheek. Richard reached up hesitantly and brushed it away with his thumb, the tender gesture achingly familiar. It's late, Emma said, suddenly aware of the emotional exhaustion weighing on her. We should get some sleep. Tomorrow we can talk more. Richard nodded, reluctantly letting go of her hand. I'll take the guest room. Thank you, Emma said, grateful he hadn't presumed they would immediately return to sharing a bedroom. They had taken the first step toward reconciliation tonight, but they had a long journey ahead. As they moved toward the hallway, Richard paused and turned back to her. Emma? Yes? Thank you for not giving up on us, he said quietly. Even when I had. Emma smiled softly. Good night, Richard. Good night, he replied, his eyes lingering on her face as if memorizing it anew. As Emma entered their bedroom alone, she felt lighter than she had in years. Tonight had been about more than shocking Richard with her transformation. It had been about rediscovering her own strength, her own worth. Whatever happened next, she would face it as the woman she was always meant to be, confident, strong, and unafraid to claim her place in the world. The masquerade was over. The real work of rebuilding their marriage was just beginning. 1 month later, the aroma of garlic and herbs filled the penthouse kitchen as Emma stirred the simmering sauce. Sunday jazz played softly in the background. Ella Fitzgerald, one of their old favorites. She swayed slightly to the music, contentment washing over her. That smells amazing, Richard said, entering the kitchen with 2 glasses of wine. He handed one to Emma and clinked his glass against hers. To Sunday dinners. Emma smiled, accepting both the wine and the toast. To Sunday dinners, she echoed. In the months since the gala, they had established new rituals while reclaiming some old ones. Sunday cooking was back, along with a no phones, no work policy for the entire day. Their home felt like a home again, not just an expensive showcase where two people happen to live. Richard moved to the counter and resumed chopping vegetables, his sleeves rolled up, tie long discarded. He looked more relaxed than he had in years. The perpetual furrow between his brows smoothed away. "How was your meeting with the Peterson Foundation yesterday?" he asked, scraping diced peppers into a bowl. Emma's eyes lit up. "Wonderful. They've approved my proposal for the Community Art Center redesign. I start next month." "That's fantastic!" Richard beamed with genuine pride. They couldn't have chosen anyone better. The job was Emma's first major design project in years, a step toward reclaiming her professional identity. Gregory Peterson had been delighted when she approached him with the idea, remembering her talent from the mural project years earlier. "Dr. Levine says it's important for me to pursue my own passions," Emma said, referring to their marriage counselor. "To rebuild my identity outside of being Mrs. Kent." "She's right," Richard agreed. He had taken to therapy with surprising commitment, never missing a session despite his demanding schedule. "I fell in love with Emma, the brilliant designer, not just Emma, my wife." Emma smiled at him over the rim of her wine glass. "Sometimes I think Dr. Levine should charge double for all the issues we're dumping on her." Richard laughed. The sound still new enough in their home to feel precious. "She's earning every penny. But it's helping, isn't it? You feel it too?" "I do," Emma admitted. "Talking about everything, the miscarriages, the way we both withdrew, your criticism, my passivity, it's painful but necessary." "Like lancing a wound," Richard said with a grimace. "Hurts like hell, but it's the only way to heal properly." Emma nodded, turning back to her sauce. They worked in companionable silence for a while, moving around each other in the kitchen with practiced ease. When Ella began singing, "The Way You Look Tonight," Richard set down his knife and turned to Emma, hand extended. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Kent?" Emma placed her wooden spoon on the rest holder and took his hand. "You may, Mr. Kent." Richard pulled her into his arms, one hand at the small of her back, the other clasping hers as they began to sway in the center of the kitchen. Emma rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath his casual shirt. "I missed this," Richard murmured into her hair. "How did I ever let this go?" "We both did," Emma reminded him, "but we found our way back." Richard pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. "I still can't believe you pulled off that masquerade. When I think about how I treated you, then spent the whole evening captivated by you without realizing who you were." "It was quite a night," Emma agreed with a small smile, "though I don't recommend elaborate disguises as a standard marriage counseling technique." Richard laughed, spinning her in a slow circle before pulling her back into his arms. "I'm just grateful it worked, when you took off that mask." He shook his head in wonder. "It was like seeing you for the first time all over again." "In a way you were," Emma said thoughtfully. "Not because of how I looked, but because you were finally ready to see me." The timer on the oven beeped, signaling that the bread was ready. With reluctance, they separated, returning to the business of dinner preparation. As Emma bent to remove the bread, she caught Richard watching her with an expression of such tenderness it made her heart skip. "What?" she asked, setting the bread on a cooling rack. "You're beautiful," he said simply. "Not because of the haircut or the clothes or any of that, though I do like the new style," he added with a smile. "You're beautiful because you're you-strong, resilient, compassionate." Emma felt a blush rise to her cheeks. After years of criticism, sincere compliments still felt new and slightly uncomfortable. "Thank you," she said softly. Richard crossed to her and took her hands in his. "I've been thinking about something, a way to mark this new beginning." "What did you have in mind?" Emma asked. "I thought perhaps we could renew our vows," he suggested. "Not a big production, just us and a few close friends. A way to recommit to each other with our eyes wide open this time." Emma considered the idea. "I'd like that," she said finally. But not yet. Let's give ourselves a little more time to heal, to make sure this renewal is really solid. Richard nodded, understanding in his eyes. You're right. There's no rush. We have time. Time. Such a simple concept, yet so precious. Time to rebuild trust, to relearn each other, to create a marriage that was truly equal and supportive. Later that evening, after their leisurely dinner and comfortable conversation, they stood together at the same window where Emma had stood alone just a month earlier, contemplating the ruins of her marriage. Now Richard's arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against him as they looked out at the city lights. "I got a call from Melissa today," Richard said. "She's accepted that VP position at Lambert Corp." Emma looked up at him, surprised. "You're not upset about losing her?" Richard shook his head. "No. It's a better opportunity for her, and frankly, I think we both knew it was time for a change." He smiled ruefully. "Besides, the new assistant I hired is 62, has 5 grandchildren, and told me in no uncertain terms that she doesn't work weekends because that's family time." Emma laughed. "I like her already." "I thought you might." Richard pressed a kiss to her temple. "Just one of many changes I'm making at the office. The board nearly had a collective heart attack when I announced I'd be taking actual vacations this year." "The horror," Emma teased. "A CEO who believes in work-life balance." "I'm thinking of starting a trend," Richard said with mock seriousness. "Billionaires who prioritize their marriages over their bottom lines. It could catch on." "Revolutionary," Emma agreed, snuggling closer to his side. As they stood together, looking out at the city they both loved, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the depths of rejection to the beginning of genuine reconciliation, they had traversed an emotional landscape neither had expected. "What are you thinking about?" Richard asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "About us. About how close we came to losing everything." Richard tightened his arm around her. "I almost threw away the best thing in my life because I was too blind to see what was right in front of me." "We both lost our way," Emma said. "But that night at the gala, somehow we found each other again." She turned in his arms to face him. "I never thought a rejection could turn into something so positive." "I'll spend the rest of my life making that rejection up to you," Richard promised, his eyes serious. Emma reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I believe you." And she did. The past month had shown her a different Richard, or rather, the return of the man she had married. He was present now, attentive, genuinely interested in her thoughts and feelings. The cold, critical businessman who had rejected her had been replaced by a husband who looked at her each day as if seeing her anew. For her part, Emma had continued her own transformation. Not just the external changes, though. She had maintained her new hairstyle and updated wardrobe, but the internal ones. She was no longer waiting for Richard's approval or permission to be herself. She had reclaimed her voice, her passions, her confidence. Their marriage wasn't perfect. They still had disagreements, still stumbled occasionally over old patterns and hurts. But now they faced those challenges together, with honesty and respect. The wall between them had crumbled, replaced by a bridge they both worked daily to strengthen. "You know what I was thinking earlier today?" Richard said, leading her to the sofa where they sat close together, his arms still around her shoulders. "What?" "About how lucky I am that you didn't just walk away when you had every right to, that you created this amazing moment that forced me to really see you again." His voice grew husky with emotion. "I don't think I've properly thanked you for that." Emma smiled softly. "You've been thanking me every day since, in all the ways that matter." Richard reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Maybe, but I wanted to give you something tangible too, something to mark our new beginning." Emma looked at the box with surprise. "Richard, you don't need to." "I know I don't need to," he interrupted gently. "I want to." He opened the box to reveal a stunning emerald pendant on a delicate gold chain, the exact shade of deep green that had matched her gala dress and mask. "Oh," Emma breathed, touching the beautiful stone with one finger. "It's the same color. To remind us both of the night everything changed," Richard explained. "The night I fell in love with my wife all over again." He removed the necklace from the box. "May I?" Emma nodded, turning so he could fasten it around her neck. The emerald rested just below her collarbone, catching the light as it rose and fell with her breathing. "Perfect," Richard murmured, his eyes warm as they met hers. Emma touched the pendant, feeling its smooth surface beneath her fingertips. "Thank you, it's beautiful." "Like its wearer," Richard said, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips. Later, as they prepared for bed, now sharing the master bedroom again after weeks of careful rebuilding of intimacy, Emma paused before the mirror, looking at her reflection. The woman who gazed back at her was neither the rejected wife who had crumpled under Richard's cruel words, nor the mysterious stranger who had captivated him at the gala. She was something better, a blend of both, along with new strength and wisdom hard-won through pain and forgiveness. The emerald at her throat caught the light, a symbol of transformation and renewal. Like the gem, she had emerged from pressure and darkness to reveal her true brilliance. Richard appeared behind her in the mirror, wrapping his arms around her waist and meeting her eyes in the reflection. "What do you see?" he asked softly. Emma smiled, leaning back against him. "Us," she said simply. As Richard tightened his embrace, Emma knew this was just the beginning of their renewed journey together. There would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and difficulty, but they had found their way back to each other through the most unlikely of circumstances, and that gave her faith in their future. Sometimes, she reflected, rejection could be the first step toward the deepest acceptance. Richard turned her in his arms and kissed her, gentle at first, and then with growing passion. The emerald glowed between them, a promise kept, a love rediscovered. And as Emma returned his kiss, she knew with absolute certainty that this was their real happy ending, not a fairy tale conclusion, but the beginning of a richer, truer love story than either of them had ever imagined possible.